This is day 3, the rainy day 3 of Web Design World. And this is our user experience workshop track in this side. In the morning, we're going to be hearing from Jeffrey Veen from Adaptive Path. And in the afternoon, we're going to be hearing from Jared Spool from User Interface Engineering. What an incredible lineup of 2 dynamic, brilliant speakers. And we're going to be doing lunch today, again, in the area where we had lunch on Monday. That is from 12:30 until 2 o'clock. And I just wanted to make one more announcement to clarify what has become a frequently asked question, and that deals with the evaluation forms, which, A, please fill them out with as much detail as you have time for. Turn them in at the end of the day for a T-shirt and our undying gratitude. And B, what does commercial mean? And what commercial means is that's your opportunity to judge whether or not, or to tell us whether or not you felt that a session or a speaker was too commercial in his or her session. In other words, if they spent the whole session plugging a product that he or she sells or a service that he or she sells. It does not mean, was the session applicable in a commercial context, which some people checked yes for, and now that's going to completely mess up. It's going to cause Excel to crash. Anyway, I'm not going to take up any more of Jeff's time because I'm dying to hear what he has to say. So please say good morning to Jeffrey Veen from Adaptive Path.
Oh, thanks, Jim. Oh, look, and water too. You supplied beverages. That's very nice. Hi, good morning. Wow, it is kind of a rainy, dreary morning here in San Francisco. I came flying over here this morning from across town on my scooter, so I got a little damp as I started today, but whatever. Wow, hang on a sec. Let me try this. Is this a little better? I think I'm probably just about tall enough for you to see me in the back. A little more comfortable. I'll probably go tumbling off of that stage if I stay up there all day. So, well, good morning. We've got a few hours to talk here today, and I encourage you to try to save a little bit of energy if you can for Jared. I don't know. He might turn the volume up a little bit today, but I think if he does, we might all be in a little bit of trouble. We got a lot of cool stuff to talk about. I'm going to kind of take off from where I started. Were all of you at the keynote, I guess 2 days ago, wasn't that? Was anybody not? Let me just ask. Oh, good. You're just one person. Let me fill you in real quick what we talked about. No, sorry. All right, we're kind of start from a foundation of that. We're talking about the next generation of the web, or Web 2.0, or Web plus Ajax, or Flash, or whatever. A lot of that stuff. And I want to kind of start and dig into what it means to do this stuff. I've been talking about it kind of at a higher, like a thematic level. But I really do today want to drill into a lot of the research methods behind the work we're doing, the design principles around the changes that we've been talking about for the last 2 days at this conference. I have a good story, I think. It's a story I've been telling for years, and it really helps illustrate where we are today, kind of based on where we were a while back. So I live here in San Francisco. I love it when everybody comes to me for a workshop rather than me traveling again, because that gives me the opportunity to sort of stay here and ride my bike. I do a tremendous amount of cycling, and I love it. It's a passion that I have. It's challenging, as you can imagine, here in San Francisco. Considering our particular geography, there's no such thing as a flat ride here. And it was about 10 years ago now, I was riding my bike over to work. I worked just a couple blocks from here, south of Market at Hotwired, which was the spin-off, the commercial website that came out of Wired magazine. And I was riding my bike down this hill, thankfully down, going really fast, like maybe 30 miles an hour, into an intersection where a big Lincoln Town car turns left in front of me, and I hit that car broadside, went sort of sailing across the intersection, very cinematic arc, into the pavement, broke my shoulder, twisted up my bike. The ambulance came, they picked me up, and my bike, I demanded, bike comes with us, into the back of the ambulance, and off we go to San Francisco General, to the emergency room. And I'm in the back, and there's this EMT who's taking care of me and, cutting my jersey off of me and all that good stuff. And he says, yeah, you seem a little short of breath. Do you need some oxygen or anything? I was like, no, I'm fine. And he says, are you in a lot of pain? And I said, yeah, I'm in a lot of pain. And he says, well, can I give you anything? I'm like, no, I'm fine. He's like, well, trying to get my mind off of what just happened to me. He said, so tell me what you do for a living. And I said, I'm a web designer. I make websites. And he said, oh, that's very interesting. I have a website. And I think, oh, no, not in the back of the ambulance. And he says, I'm trying to dither all my graphics into the web-safe color palette using Photoshop. Do you know how to do that? And I said, just give me the oxygen, I think. I don't want to do this now. But that was 1994. That was when we were building websites like this. Anybody remember this website? Anybody? Oh, good, thank you. This is a great audience already, I can tell. This was, this is almost 12 years ago that we were building websites like this. And that scene in the back of the ambulance was very much like the kinds of conversations that we would have all the time about the web. Oh, you work on the web? I work on the web. Everybody who was on the web was also building the web. And it's very different, very, very different from how it is now. Because we made a ton of assumptions back then about the technological sophistication of the audience that we had, about their experience, about their perspective on the world. Because, frankly, everybody who was out there, our audience, were not only consumers, but they were producers. They were just like us. So we didn't worry too much about audience, as you could probably tell here. This is we won, design awards for this, and it was like everybody's like, oh my God, there's no drop shadows or beveled edges. This is so different. And now I look back at this and I go, now what was the difference between Signal and Eyewitness? I had no idea. The only way I'd be able to figure it out, right, is to click and go and look. And remember how slow the web was back then? I mean, how slow the web was? This is a really sort of confusing and painful experience even for people who knew a lot about the web. So that sort of sets us up to talk about considering how dramatically different the web is today and how different our audience is today. I mean, our audience is everybody. It's everybody who could be out there with every possible perspective and bias and understanding and level of technological comfort, everything. How does that change the way we do web design? And I'm going to spend a little bit of time this morning sort of bringing us up to where we are today with our websites changing and not being able to take the kind of risk that we had 10 years ago, 5 years ago even. Back then, when we built this, as soon as we launched this, the next thing we started doing was working on a complete redesign. And we redesigned, and we literally tore everything down, put it all back up, and said, how's this? And tried to see what people thought. And a bunch of email would come in, where's everything, can't find anything, don't know what's going on. We'd tear it all apart and do it again. It was a process of complete experimentation over and over again, and trying to build up a little bit of learning as we went along. And this was probably fine back then, and frankly was part of our charter back then. But not so at all anymore, where companies live and breathe and die by their websites and simply can't afford that amount of risk. They have to know what they're getting into before they can sort of make the changes that they want to make. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. But first, I want to talk about my kitchen. This was my kitchen. This was my kitchen about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, when we did a complete sort of remodel of like half of the place where we lived. Just tore it, as you can see, down to the floorboards and the walls and the ceiling, everything came down. Totally. This is not the fun part of remodeling a kitchen. But the fun part of remodeling a kitchen, of course, is buying new stuff, because buying new stuff is always fun. So like most everybody today, I did most of my research on the web. And I remember researching refrigerators and trying to sort of, make that decision. This is also the time, if you remember, when California was in the news a lot for our rolling blackouts and our brownouts, and our utility prices went up 300% in 1 year, while the guys at Enron felt like it was a big video game that they could play with our money and our resources. I think are they paying for that now? I don't know if they are. They should be. So energy consumption was a huge deal for me and my wife as we were looking for new appliances. So one of the big things that I was looking for is how much energy does this thing take? How much is it going to cost to run? And as I went from website to website, I was looking for Energy Star compliance. Right? Is this an environmentally sound appliance that I'm about to buy? Maytag didn't have that information, so I sent him a little email. And I said, I'm remodeling my kitchen and buying new appliances, and while researching this, I was visiting your site to see how your refrigerators compared to other manufacturers. One of my most important decision factors is the amount of energy that the product uses, but I couldn't find this anywhere listed on your site. And look, so I'm being a typical user, right? I'm like, I can't find it. I've made a mistake. Can you help me? And that's just, from the hundreds, thousands probably of usability sessions that I've witnessed, this is what people do, right? This transference of like, this, I guess I'm not smart enough to figure this out. Am I not looking in the right place? So they write back and say, Dear Jeff, thank you for visiting the Maytag homepage. We welcome the opportunity to assist you. Please forward your model number, and we can send you the energy rating for that model. Love, Eric. So I wrote Eric back. I said, I think you're misunderstanding me. I want to buy a new one, and I want to compare all the ratings of all the models. I'm looking for the rating on the product description page. And so Eric, actually Jennifer, writes back and says, unfortunately, the energy ratings are not listed on the web page. Sorry for the inconvenience. So now I'm gonna go into maybe the 0.5 percentile of people that keeps writing back. And I say, Jennifer, right, I realize that. That's why I mentioned it. It's a pretty crucial decision-making point for me. You should consider having your web team add it to the standard product page. And I'm thinking, maybe we could get Maytag as a client out of this, right? So Jennifer, well, no, not Jennifer, Scott now, writes back and says, thank you for your comments. In the future, please include your model number of the Maytag appliance so we can assist you more effectively. So this would be a good sort of thing to show at a, what do they call it, customer relationship management seminar or something, right? Because this is it falling apart. They have no sense of my history or anything or what kind of relationship that I've ever had with their company or products. But why would I start a web design seminar with an experience like this? Anybody? What do you think? It can only get better from here. Yeah, that's certainly true. Assuming I have any more relationship with Maytag. And I didn't buy the Maytag after all. Anybody? What do you think? The sheer torture of it, which sounds like you've had many times at other websites. Yeah, absolutely. And findability. Like, I couldn't find the information, but they had it, didn't they? Like, if I had a model number, the elusive model number, like, I could have given them that model number, they could have given that data back to me. So somewhere in the organization, the data exists, and Scott and Jennifer and, who's the first guy? Eric, they all had access to the information. How come I didn't? Who made that decision that this piece of data wouldn't be on the websites, but other pieces of data would be? Especially considering I'm probably not the only one asking. This was a while back in an energy crisis in California. Now that information is on the Maytag website subsequently. So somebody, yeah, go ahead. They had no idea what the users wanted to achieve. They didn't know the goals of their users, or at least not this particular one. How could they have found out besides simply listening to customer service? They could have done a competitive analysis. Like literally every other refrigerator website I went to had that information there. So somewhere the process broke down. Yeah, in the back. Maybe they were hiding the information. Yeah, that's true. Very well could be. I don't remember how Maytag actually did. But that very may well be that they didn't want to compete on that information, but they would dribble the data out if somebody really asked, right? So there was either a conscious or unconscious decision not to include some of the data that would have made my user experience, and probably the user experience of a lot of other people, a lot better. And so I want to sort of drill into that a little bit and use a framework. This is just a little more of my history. After about 6 years at Wired, and Wired was acquired by Lycos, and I worked there for a while. And then I started a consulting company with some friends. And the first thing we realized because we had all been doing product work, moving into consulting, the first thing we had to do was get 3 circles that intersected and tell our clients that you want to be right in the middle. So these are my 3 circles. Bear with me as we go through this. No, but this is actually a really interesting framework to think about, well, how do products succeed and fail on the web? And how can we apply a layer of understanding that Maytag clearly didn't have to a framework like this to help us as we sort of develop our products? Because it's so easy to work in a vacuum, a siloed vacuum where the web design team never talks to anybody else and nobody else talks to them. And that's clearly what was happening at an organization like at Maytag, where I'm sure the web design team had very little connection with customer support and customer service or whatever they called it. So the first circle I want to talk about is viability, and by that I mean economic viability. Can this thing live in the wild, and can it be sustainable, and can it not be a drain on the organization, but rather a positive influence economically on that organization? So important for designers to understand the goals of business as well as the goals of the user so that they can connect those things together. And that is one of the things, frankly, that I learned in the last few years of consulting in a variety of organizations, is that when designers start to understand the business language and can communicate in the same language with the business stakeholders, it makes it so much easier to do the right thing. Even if that right thing is getting your designs approved and through and up on the website, because the best design in the world isn't successful if it never launches. So economic viability is something that I find myself, frankly, worrying about an awful lot as a designer these days. Feasibility as well, and I've always been a big proponent of like mixing designers and technical people together, and frankly, I don't see much difference anymore, and that makes me really, really happy. I was down talking to some folks at Google just a couple weeks ago, and the design director there told me that half of the designers at Google have a computer science degree. And that may be reflective of their particular design aesthetic. But at the same time, I love workshops like this, the last 2 days, where there's so much technical content intertwined with the design work that we're doing, and that emphasis on technologies like CSS and whatnot, showing that designers are really embracing, and they're not just spending their days in Photoshop and throwing stuff over the wall anymore. So feasibility, technological feasibility. Can the thing that I'm thinking up that I want to present to users, can that be built? So not only is it economically viable, but can it actually be built in a sustainable way, in a way that's going to make sense, in a way that's not going to take racks and racks of servers or whatever. And then finally, the sort of design end of things, I like to think of as a little more about desirability rather than just pure visual aesthetics, or even on the flip side of that coin, the pure usability. Because even if something is really, really usable, it's not going to necessarily create affinity with people. Not necessarily, right? I talked a little bit about this the other day when we talked about the surface and building trust, and we flashed those websites up on the screen and saying, which ones do you trust? That immediate sort of visceral connection, emotional connection that we have to our products, or to products that we see. That's what we sort of build the desirability out of, right? That connection with people, not just the overall experience, but the experience they have at every level with a product. All the way, frankly, down to the customer service, as we saw from that little example we had with Maytag. So that's the sort of big picture there. If you think back about products that have sort of worked or not worked, and we can see that in balance as a way of thinking like, all right, so I made a great product that really resonated with users, but there was no business model around it, right? So there was no way for it to become economically sustainable or viable out in the market. Or we had a great idea for an awesome business, but there was literally no way that we could build this in a way that people would sort of connect with it. I think about the convergence of technologies years back, where PCs started shipping with CD-ROMs, audio compression got a lot better, and broadband sort of started taking off, especially with younger people, especially in college dorm rooms, and out of that came MP3s, and from that came Napster. There was a product that had amazing technological feasibility. It was almost magic. You typed in the name of a song, and it started playing. I mean, that's remarkable. And it had a tremendous amount of desirability. I mean, it was free music. People loved it. Was there economic viability? No. In fact, quite the opposite. It took the viability away from really some fairly strong and powerful players in an industry that had been entrenched in intellectual property for a long time. So it wasn't until those three things were in balance that we started to see products like this that really sort of took, okay, so that the technological convergence is here. We've got a product that is a tiny, tiny little hard drive that you can fit in your pocket now, that has that unbelievable desirability. Really, my entire CD collection, I can just take it with me, and it's like white and shiny, and I like holding it in my hand. And it has been backed up by that business model, right? The business model that is allowing the sort of concession between ripping and burning and stealing music and buying music and the business models, and that seems to be working. So putting those things into balance is what really kind of makes the product work for, or really sort of makes that go. Oh my, there we go. Oh my, that's Jacob Nielsen, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, but want to use as an example of kind of where we have come from in the web. I like that in the back. Oh, ho, ho. Jacob can be a little bit didactic. He often believes good web design means following rules, which can often be true. But that he kind of prefers when they're his rules. And like I said, I have a lot of respect for him because, frankly, we wouldn't have seen the term usability or user-centered design in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post if it wasn't for him out there every day sort of crusading for these things. But he also tends to see things fairly black and white. And if we want to build a sort of holistic product that matches viability, feasibility, and desirability, we might have to use rules as a foundation to sort of take off from there to understand our users in our particular context. Let me give you an example of this. One of his famous essays back a few years ago were the top 10 guidelines for homepage usability. He says they were ways to increase the usability of your homepage and enhance your website's business value. If we look at these 10 things, right, they are all true. They really are. They will all make a particular website better. Include a one-sentence tagline. I can't tell you, especially in this world of all these new little startups and web apps popping up all over the web, how many of them I literally can't tell what they do until I click around and dig in. And a simple one-sentence tagline, fantastic. Easy access to recent homepage features, the what's new, and now typically blogs, right, like with the RSS feed and all the stuff that's been happening. Sure, examples of real site content, fantastic. Include a search input box, right? If your navigation falls down, people will use search to write their own navigation. Of course, that's perfect. We should do all of these things. All of these are true, but all of them you could put behind there, it depends, right? It depends on your website. It depends on our particular context. Let me give you an example. How many of you have seen this website? 2 people only? Okay. This website consistently ranks in the top 10 of e-commerce websites in North America. I think they do like $1 billion of e-commerce through this website. And 2 people in a crowd filled with web designers, or at least people who spend their days on the web. Only 2 people have heard of them. Let's try to figure out what they are. They have tons of great products and exclusive brands, famous names. They're apparently... the audience is very happy with their lifestyles and are very ethnically diverse. To get in, you need a quick start number. Do either one of you have a quick start number? Oh, you do? Wow. That's literally never happened to me in a presentation before. That's really impressive. How do you like the website? It's slow. So there's a feasibility problem they must have, right? Anyway, all of this stuff, like this is one of the most impenetrable websites, at least front pages, that I've ever seen. And I'm sure they've redesigned it recently or whatever. But we can't tell what's going on here or who they are, yet they do $1 billion of e-commerce every year. So this is the front page to the e-commerce end of Amway, the big, what's the right way to put that? I don't want to offend you or anything. Let's say multi-level marketing. No, that's probably not right either. They are a giant organization in now worldwide that sells products through what they call the high-touch relationship, right? That means nobody really ever buys a product without another person sitting right there. So you sign up for Quickstar, Amway, and you get your friends and family to sort of buy products from you, and they in turn sell products to their friends and family. But nobody ever comes to this page without somebody sitting next to them going, I have a quick start number for you. Type it in here and I'll show you this website, right? That's pretty much how it works. So none of this stuff on Jacob's page of guidelines applies to this particular context. Now, I'm kind of setting out stakes here on the ends of the continuum, of course. But it does illustrate how it depends on a particular context for what we're trying to accomplish. So how do we figure out what our context is, right? That's the key for us to do good design. What is our particular context so we can apply these rules to it? This is a little placeholder for me to remember to talk about kayaking, because kayaking is a fantastic analogy for what exactly I'm talking about. Kayaking is an incredibly difficult sport, especially here in the Bay Area, because we have the winds and the tides out on the bay. It's kind of a dramatic place, especially considering the huge amount of traffic that's out there. It's relatively easy to die when you're kayaking. So in order to learn kayaking, you have to take sort of the balance of what context I'm in, what have I learned out there, with what have I learned from sort of book knowledge, right? So can't I just follow the rules? Well, no, we can't just follow the rules in a thing like kayaking because of situations like this. This is a quote I got from a book called Sea Kayakers' Deep Trouble, which is 100 case studies of people who have died while kayaking. A little light reading. But it's amazing, right? Like they talk about what happened, they deconstruct the problem, and they say, how could you have avoided doing this, right? And they kind of walk you through all of that. Tremendous way to learn about the complexities of this particular sport. So obeying the rules without an understanding of the reasons behind them creates an approximation of competence, which leaves one vulnerable to the exceptions. That's from the introduction of the kayaking book, but how well does that apply to what we're doing on the web, right? Where I can come and I want to get the tips and tricks, and I'll take those and I'll stick them on my website, and that will solve the problem. Well, that's sort of the approximation of competence that they're talking about here, right? Leaving us vulnerable to the exceptions. So in kayaking, we're out paddling along, and the tide is coming in, and the wind is blowing against it, and all of a sudden, we're in the water, and there's a big boat coming. And we have about 10 or 15 minutes to get back into our kayak and try to dry off before, your hands stop working, and you turn hypothermic, and you're done. Now, was that in Chapter 8, or was that in Chapter 9, right? Like, that's not the kind of place where we're going to be thinking about what we learned in the book. We're going to be relying on experience for how we solve these problems so that we're not vulnerable to the exceptions. So rules, sure, we can learn the rules, right? We can learn some good tips and tricks for how to do good web design, but really, it's very nascent. I talk about 10 or 12 years of working on the web. The tiny tip of the iceberg is all we've uncovered about how the web works. Think about how different it is now from even 4 or 5 years ago, right? It's dramatic how different it is. So it takes sort of a different perspective than just following these rules and kind of relying on best practices. There are tons of best practices. There are so many. We're going to look at a whole bunch today, best practices for design, but we have to remember those in the context that it's just too early on the web to depend on them exclusively. There's no sort of one true way. There's no path for us to follow, a 4-step process that we sort of stick an idea in. A good website will spit out of the back. Just can't do it yet. So let me tell you another cycling story as a way of really reinforcing this point. This is Gino Bartali. He's an Italian cyclist who won the Tour de France 2 times in the 1930s and 40s. What makes him unique is he won it 2 times with 10 years in between because they had a war on in Europe and they didn't run the race. So we can only speculate at how amazing he would have been had he been able to race through those 10 years and not been out on the lines fighting. He's also unique because he was the first one to win a Tour de France using a derailleur, using more than one gear. So here you can see him. This is the device he used. Beautiful Italian craftsmanship. It's just absolutely gorgeous, but a little primitive in how exactly it worked. So before this device, a cyclist had 2 gears, one on either side of the back wheel. And when they get to the bottom of the hill, they would disconnect the back wheel, literally get off their bike and take it off and spin it around and rethread the chain and tighten the wheel and ride up with the big gear, get to the top of the hill, do that process again, and ride down with the small gear on the other side. This little device allowed the cyclist to do that process while they were riding the bike. It's literally the same process we use today, though with 20 or 30 gears, but he was doing with 4 or 5 gears by using these 2 little hinges here, right? So you can see him reaching down here and trying to flip one of those switches. So what he'd do is reach down and literally unhinge the wheel. Like while he's pedaling along, he'd disconnect the axle from the frame and start wobbling so that the chain would be a little loose so he could push that chain up onto another gear with the other lever and then tighten it back up while going 15 or 20 miles an hour on the cobblestone roads with your hands next to the spokes. They thought when this happened that it was the pinnacle of technology. This was, oh my God, this changes everything, right? Cyclists could go so much faster. Suddenly all the records started breaking. As you could imagine, there was a huge group of traditionalists that fought back against the derailleur and said, this is destroying cycling. But they thought they were done. They had figured it out, right? Cycling will never get any better than this. Well, this is where we are today, right? The technology, talk about advancing, right? They run the Tour de France, I think, 40% faster than they did even back then. That entire bicycle that Lance Armstrong is racing in this picture weighs less than the levers that he was flipping on the back there. The training, the everything. Unbelievable amount of technological progress. And of course, what was that, about 50 years, 60 years, to sort of get us to where we are today. So that's where Gino, reaching back by the spokes, is where I kind of feel like we're getting to today. We might be at the 2nd generation of this, clunky little new technology. But we've got so much to go, and I hope to get here, frankly, in my lifetime, in my career. I think seeing the rate of progress and how much more compressed it is today, I think we're going to probably get there. But I just wanted to reinforce how much we have to learn yet, how little we can rely, I believe, on those rules. So let's talk about user-centered design, because it's hard, right? This sort of illustrates this. This is you and whatever you do. I'm assuming not a lot of you probably work in a big building with smokestacks on the top, but let's consider this, right, a concern on the web. Some company, some organization, doesn't matter whether you work on an intranet or work for clients or whatever. There is an organization. That organization has an audience. Those little, maybe you remember them from a kid where you'd put them in the bus, right, the little Fisher-Price characters. Your audience and your business both have goals. The goals for the business, well, you want to sell more stuff. Working on the intranet, who knows? Maybe you want to cut costs, right? We want to move HR forms from paper into PDFs to save money or whatever, but you want to make more profit. You certainly want that economic viability. Maybe you want to increase a brand awareness. Who knows? There's as many goals for a business as there are people here who represent business. But that doesn't match what people want. Nobody wants you to make more profit, unless possibly shareholders. What they want to do when they come to the website is to get stuff done. Right? I got to buy a new refrigerator. Are you going to help me do that? Are you going to help me find the best price or the best particular product for me? Are you going to help me feel special? Feel like a customer? Feel like there's a connection there? Or have 3 different people tell me the same information over and over again, right? So goals for the business and goals for the users. The problem is we do it with this, right? This collection of pixels on the screen. We don't get to talk to people. We don't have a connection with them. We have to communicate through this in a way that connects those goals together, which is remarkably difficult. So let's talk about how to do that. Here's a good definition that we've been using for a while of user-centered design. It is to develop an experience. It's an experience for your users, right? Based on the patterns inherent in your stuff that will empower users to accomplish their goals. So an experience that connects people to your stuff. And stuff is a pretty sort of generic and ambiguous word, and I use that, frankly, very specifically because it doesn't matter what the stuff is. It could be you're selling DVDs online. It could be that you're offering grant proposals to nonprofits. It doesn't matter. It is stuff that your users need to get to, whether it's through a giant content website, whether it's through a web application. It is a connection that people are trying to make between where they are with their goals not accomplished, where they want to be with things being done. So let's talk about this in a little bit of an abstract way. So how do we get this pile of stuff, this abstract stuff that your organization has and wants to give to people? How do we get that pile of stuff into a way that people are going to understand it, right? We kind of need to get that into a structured experience. So here I've taken all the shapes with their colors, kind of lined them up in a way that makes sense to me, at least, as a designer. I see some patterns there in the stuff that are going to help me explain what we have to our users. So I labeled that stuff, right? And I say, yeah, we've got squares, triangles, and circles. I'm doing information architecture here, right? I'm finding structure in the chaos of my content. I use that structure on the screen to design navigation, right? In a way that I hope is going to be intuitive to users. Because once we've done this, we have solved design. That's all design is. Taking the chaos of the stuff around us, finding the structure, pulling the structure out of that, and explaining it to users through an interface that's going to be intuitive to them. So that when they come, it makes sense. They get it. They don't have to think about it. They can look at that and go, that's the thing I want. That's exactly what I was trying to do. And their expectations will be met. If we can meet people's expectations, we've solved usability problems. That's all usability is, managing expectations. I wish it were that easy. It's a bunch of shapes, because not all users have the same goals or the same experiences. Here, one user sees that content as shapes, and another one more intuitively sees that as colors. So a good design, at whatever level, from the surface to the structure and skeleton all the way up, but a good design will let whatever users you have access whatever stuff you've got in a variety of different ways. So however they want to get to that is the way that you need to provide them access to that. That's what makes our jobs hard. Trying to understand who all those users are and how they connect to all the stuff we have. So it's not as easy as it sounds with shapes and colors and a bunch of Fisher-Price users. the way in which people perceive the world, the way in which we classify the world around us is different for everybody. Here's two radically different views of the exact same stuff, right? The elements around us, and people perceive them so differently. Let me give you just a classic example. You go to the movie theater, order your popcorn, and you say, give me one of these. What do you call that? What do you call that? A soda? How many of you call it a soda, would ask for a soda? About half. What else? Coke? You'd ask for Coke? Who asked for Coke? A few hands? That's what I would have done too. And anybody else? Pop? Anybody? How many pops? A few. Because we're on the West Coast, I think. A soft drink? There's a few more. Anything else? A fountain drink? Okay. From like the 1890s? Like, I'm sorry. Oh, I made fun of it. Yeah, so even in this room, right, something as simple as a carbonated sweet beverage, we have differing opinions. And it's a superficial example, but look how it kind of maps out, right? I love this website. I think it's sodaversuspop.com. And you go in there, and for years now, this has been around as long as I can remember, you go and you like click on what you called it when you were a kid and type in the zip code where you grew up. And this is what they've done with their countless data. This is what they've come up with. So the people who call it Coke, are you from the South? Were you a Coke person? Yeah? Grew up in the South? Yeah? Nice. And the pop going up sort of north, and then sodas on the edges. It's interesting to see pockets like that. It's a simple example. For some reason, I grew up in Los Angeles, and we called it Coke. My friends would come over. I'd say, you want a Coke? They say, yeah. I say, what kind? Dr. Pepper. Okay, I get you Dr. Pepper. It doesn't make any sense, but that's what we did. I love this one. Like fountain drink was one. I don't know if that's on here. Fizz, phosphate. These are other. You can type in other, right? Phosphate is actually what it was called. Soda pop was a brand of phosphate in the 1890s. You would know this, in the 1890s. Sorry. Bubble water, lolly water, I think is an Australian deal. Tingle Fizz Fuzz, anybody here call that as a kid? Tonic is a popular one. So yeah, we got global issues on the web. That's just a sort of funny little superficial example. We all have different names for that very basic thing. What do we put on the tab in our navigation system when we're talking about the carbonated beverage? Silly example, but you get the point, right? Like we all have different perspectives. Think about the global issues of like what things are called. You put your web page on the web, and 5.5 billion people can now potentially see it, unless you live in China and use Google. Did I say that out loud? I'm sorry. So we're confused. That it's difficult, right? Look at what IBM has to go through. Here is their Belgium-Luxembourg site. How many of you have localized to Luxembourg? Really? Who do you work for? Sun. Okay, that makes sense. But for Symantec, okay. So some big organizations have a market in sort of the Flemish world, a tiny market. But, there's Deutschland, there's Germany, there's Taiwan. Not only are they internationalizing, not only are they taking their content and translating it, building interfaces that make sense in these other languages, but they're localizing and producing content in those areas. So it's a remarkable amount of work for organizations that have remarkable web budgets, right? It is very difficult. I have worked on some projects where we had to try to build a navigation system that would accommodate 14, 15, 16 different languages. And I try to be as culturally sensitive as possible, but boy, it's hard to find an interface that's going to work in German where there's 21 characters in every word. Right, yeah, I know. Holy cow. So, yeah. Because I was on the PC a while back when I took that screenshot. That's all. Simple as that. Accessibility issues. Oh my gosh. It frustrates me that it's 2006 now and we're still dealing with trying to convince people that their sites need to be accessible. I mean, come on. Our design, here, again, a superficial example. We used color as a way of explaining the structure of our stuff, and our user is colorblind and can't see it. Right? I use that as an example to show just how broad the notion of people with variety of abilities, the variety of problems that we're going to face as we try to do this. Look at, for example, Macy's.com from a while back. They had a functional and engaging interface. for their e-commerce website until you came here, for example, in my text-only browser, and says JavaScript is not enabled. Macy's.com requires a browser with JavaScript enabled. Please enable JavaScript or download a new web browser. So, okay, the screen readers and other accessible devices are getting better now at tricking these websites into saying I don't need all that crap in order to get to the content. But this is unbelievable that a site, an e-commerce website, as mainstream a brand as Macy's is, would do something like this. And I've been, struggling with the entire suite of Gap, Banana Republic, and Old Navy, not letting anything but modern browsers in and just saying, you know what, I guess we don't really want your money. They're doing that right now with a whole new sort of rich internet application for browsing for their particular clothing. Unbelievable. I think, frankly, this will all get solved in the courts, and it's just a matter of time, but we'll see. Jargon. I can vouch for this one, having worked at Wired for 6 years. So the marketing department said, shapes? Boring. That's not connecting with our target demographic. Let's call them web beans. And our users are like, what? Signal, eyewitness. Come on, we're news and essays, right? It's a balance between differentiation and that level of desirability and that surface level of trust that you're starting to build with users and people literally connecting with what they see on the screen, balancing that with some good usability and just helping people get in. So if we look at something like airlines, right, we have Southwest Airlines has Click and Save. United has eFares. American has Net Saver alerts. And Cathay Pacific has Fare 48. Anybody know what Fare 48 is? I thought that was sort of an international airline trying to sell tickets inside the continental United States or something, but it's just tickets that go on sale 48 hours before. I'm not suggesting that every airline say like cheap tickets be the like approved standard phrase they use for this stuff, but you can see that users might look at some of this stuff and literally Southwest Airlines, Click and Save, Rapid Rewards, what are the difference between that? I want the cheapest ticket you have. All right, look at Southwest. What do we want to do here? What's the user task here typically? What do you think? Make it get a ticket, probably, or at least shop for a ticket, whether you buy it here or not. Right? See if what's that? Check fares. How would we do that? Reservations, probably, is a good place to start. How's that different from schedules? Schedules doesn't have the price. Same data, right? Okay, fine. Book travel. How's that different from reservations? Anybody? You work for them? No. Sorry. How is it different? I don't even know.
Travel is trying to encourage you to use their entire vacation.
Oh, so it comes with a hotel and a car and a whatever. Okay. Pretty obvious. Yeah, I feel stupid now. Published fares. I wonder what that is. I can only... Do you know? Sorry. I'll start about. How about promotional fare specials? Is that different from Click and Save? You see what I'm getting at? They are casting a broad net, and sometimes that's frankly applicable to a particular audience. But a lot of times, frankly, marketing departments sort of get in there, sort of fight for space on the homepage, and try to bring programs, marketing programs that maybe make sense in the offline world, maybe only make sense internally, and bring them out onto an interface that is literally a collection of pixels with limited real estate. You just don't have the room to explain what they all mean. Internal jargon, man, that happens all the time in all kinds of organizations. And frankly, jargon is fine. It's a shorthand. It's a way to be more efficient when you communicate internally in an organization with people that work on the same stuff all the time. I mean, come on, we've got all kinds of jargon in our industry. This is an interface a friend of mine was working on for a publisher. They published the standardized testing. And this is an interface for administrators to build sort of ways to measure the effectiveness of that testing in different areas, in a bunch of different ways. They were in the final review meeting of the interface before it went out when my friend raised his hand and said, "Wait a minute, what is that second button from the top? Create a new country?" Like everyone knew, they were like, yeah, that's where you use the interface to set up, your different international regions. He's like, create a new country. Is that where you click on that and you get the wizard interface that says you want socialism or democracy or what's going on? So the jargon does creep in. We have to be careful of that. I'd probably skip this, right? Nobody really deals with politics in their organizations. Oh my goodness. So, I kid. Here's an example where a web architecture, a web interface makes the CEO happy because the CEO organized the company that way. Why shouldn't the website be organized that way? It's very similar to jargon, right? Where the user is like, what? I'm just trying to find something. See, that kind of comes from management consulting back in the late 70s and 80s, where there's a lot of emphasis on decentralization, where it was a really good thing to take these giant, bureaucratic, hierarchical organizations and split them apart into their components so that each business unit could act a little more entrepreneurially. Yeah, that's the word. So that they had this sort of responsibility for product and for profit and loss and things like that. So you could call shipping. And you could say, shipping, where's my package? And they can say, I can find that package for you. That's great. So, yeah, you had a question?
Sorry to break your flow.
No, it's fine.
On the previous slide, in your experience, how do you overcome that? Because you can spend a lot of time and resources by going through the processes and coming up with something that really effectively works, proves testing.
Sure.
And suddenly the CEO sees it. He's like, this is all wrong.
Right.
So, in your experience, how do you overcome that?
Well, when I was talking about the sort of economic viability, right, one of the key things around that little bubble in the diagram is speaking the same language. And one of the things I'll show you a little bit later is a process that I've used in the past of taking apart a user experience and translating it into something that, frankly, no offense intended, but executives would understand. I wish executives would do that for the stuff they do and help me understand because, man, the world of finance is... But I try, so doing good user-centered design, not just for the product that you're doing, but for the research and deliverables that you're trying to get approved so that you understand, like, the CEO needs to understand how this is going to work, because if I don't get their sign-off, this is never going to go. Yeah? Right. Right, so making a case, I love the language that you use, making a case for why this change to our website will make us more profitable on our website, right? The language of business, not like, this is cool, it's using Ajax, look, you don't even have to refresh the page. And you're going to have an executive team sitting around the conference table going, what on earth are you talking about? Really, you want us to spend like, a six-figure budget for the next quarter on your project because it's cool? That doesn't play, right? But if you could show, not just it's profitable, but we expect, based on our research, a 6% increase in the revenue that we get through our website based on the changes that we want to make, and we hope you'll fund us to do that. Like, that's the language of business that you need to take to make your designs happen. So, yeah, we have had, in the past here, 20 years ago, a lot of innovation in management by decentralizing organizations and empowering them to sort of solve problems for their particular customers. Well, what happens is when we got onto the web, each one of those silos in the organization that had, over the past couple decades, been empowered to solve their own problems, feel an ownership for that audience. That's only natural, right? They've been told, like, your success depends on what you know about your particular audience in our organization. So when it came time to build one big website, all of those silos were like, no, like, we're going to keep our audience. We're going to build our section of the website. We're not going to give some web team coming out of IT department or marketing department control over the user experience of our users that we've had over all of these years. And that is one of the key problems that we see in business over and over again, everywhere we go. Siloed organization, fighting for control of the users that they've had control over, had a relationship with for so many years. Now, the users come to the website, they don't care what the organization of the website, of the company is. They want a consistent experience. They want search to work the same way on each part of the site because they're moving in all different directions. They're not coming to the home page. It's confusing. I mean, look at the way GE used to have their website. GE Home, GE Business, Business Finance, Industry Solutions, Home Solutions. Where do I find the warranty information for my blender? Is that a home solution? Right? Like, this is the way the organization was frankly organized. Stuck onto the website so that people could sort of, try to grapple with, like, wow, did you know that they had business finance at GE? Who cares, right? So anyway, Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Design must also be extensible. This is my sort of Lucky Charms slide here. So we work and work and work to make that perfect architecture, right? The architecture that people are going to find intuitive. They're going to see the homepage. They're going to understand it immediately. And then day 2 after the redesign, and we add a little something, right? And then the next quarter, and we've added a few things, and it grows and it grows and it grows. But the perfect example of this, right, is Amazon. Remember when Amazon looked like this all those years ago? When I remember it was just like books, movies, and music and video. And it kind of kept growing, right? And everyone was kind of wondering, like, what's going to happen when you hit the edge of the browser and your business model doesn't scale beyond the edge of the browser, right? Remember they did this for a while? Like, I think it was maybe art and collectibles that finally they hit the edge and wrapped, right? And what happens in this user experience? They click on tools and hardware. Does it drop down and connect? Like, it started to be a mess. And what's going to happen again when they hit the edge again and again and again? Like, their business model is going to keep growing. And what's going to happen? Well, what they found, right, was that, people weren't using Amazon top down. People didn't come to Amazon and go, you know what, I really do want to find a book. I'm going to click on books and look at the sub-navigation and then look at the tertiary navigation and keep going down that way. In fact, people used Amazon by generally following a link to a product page and then out from there, and that's where all that innovation has come from. And that was the sort of like letting go of the control of the architecture that I was talking about a couple days ago. Modeling architecture over the way people are using content rather than the way we want them to use content, because frankly, that just doesn't scale. Here's an example from like 30 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, from General Magic. They made one of the first sort of PDA-like devices, tablet kind of computer. You could sort of create, add some programs to it, things like that. If you had documents that you got in here, you could file them. You had 4 places. 4 categories that you had. And then if you ran out, I think you could like go out the door to a new room and there'd be another filing cabinet or something like that. You'd see like clearly not thinking beyond the users in the lab maybe, right? Like if they had done some usability testing, found this interface works really well. How does this interface work 6 months from now, 2 years from now, right? Really sort of designing themselves into a corner, the way Amazon had been doing it as well. So we don't even know what's happening to users in the wild, right? Like if their desktop looks anything like my desktop, it's got all of these screens full of stuff happening all at once. And not only that, right, it's got the real world is happening. So you're at an e-commerce website and you're shopping. You've got like 5 other e-commerce websites open looking for the best price, looking for the right product. Pardon me, the phone rings, you pick it up and answer it and you talk for a bit. The baby starts crying, the pasta boils over. Who knows? People just don't use our websites the way that we are going to expect them to use it. No way of knowing how it's going to happen in the real world. Like I see examples of this all the time. I was buying some products for my Mac. I think I put something like $200 worth of stuff into this shopping cart and literally like got a phone call and then went to talk to somebody for a while and then came back and clicked checkout and got this. Your cart currently does not contain any items. You have already completed your order? No, I haven't. What's going on? Your session may have timed out. Does anybody outside of this room know what a session is and why it timed out? Like people have no idea what we're talking about with this jargon that's creeping into our interfaces. We assume, right, that they are going to use an experience the way that we create it. People still, this is a current website. This is my friend who graduated from the Haas School of Business over in Berkeley, sent me this screenshot of when you log into your alumni front page, they still believe that they can create like a portal where everyone will come and set as their homepage and really find really useful and that they can control that experience. The weather in Berkeley, your stocks, like all you want out of this entire thing is this little box right here. Find somebody, right? Maybe a blog would be nice to tell me what's going on in the alumni network, but that's it. That's really a design bias, right? And our goal with all of this sort of research that we're going to be talking about, the trends that we've been seeing, the issues we've been facing about letting go of control and letting users be in charge here. So the successful design really does come from 2 approaches. It's top-down and it's bottom-up. Top-down is getting to know users, right? Interviewing, observing users, that might sound like a bunch of research that's expensive and time-consuming, but what it comes down to is talking to people, looking at the email they send you. using some real common sense about how you take feedback about your designs. I'm going to show you what a mental model is, or at least our definition of a mental model, how we use that to communicate about the particular design and challenges that face a design, using that from the top down to derive the site's main areas, right? Maybe not even the main areas, but at least the way in which we describe what is possible to do at a particular website. Bottom up is much more about taking all this content, all this stuff that you have, taking an inventory of it, building a model out of that inventory, even applying some librarianship, right? Developing a thesaurus for what you're going to be calling stuff and how it connects with synonyms and all the stuff that people are looking at, letting users participate in that. And I'll show you some really innovative ways that people are taking this stuff, right, labeling that stuff and making that available to users so that they can sort of create their own experience. So how do we do this? How do we help our users? Who are those two people? Because they're coming to my website. How do I figure out who they are, what on earth they want, what they're going to be able to accomplish, what they're going to be able to use? How's it going to change the way that I do design? This is really, really hard. I think some sites actually have it a lot easier than other sites. Some sites are very, very specific to a very specific audience. I just saw a friend of mine pass along a job posting at Pixar, where you can be a user interface designer for the internal tools that they use for rendering their movies. So you have an audience of about 80 people. So I think they have a little bit easier job of doing user-centered design. It's a very specific task, and you literally sit down with each and every user and say, does this work? Right? How many of you have an opportunity to do that with your users? Anybody here? You know every single one of your users? That's pretty rare. Still hard. They don't agree, do they? No. What's that? See, and there's 700. So you still have to make generalizations. You still have to, right, try to extrapolate what works for some for what will work for everybody. Some sites are so specific in their functionality that know exactly what they need to do. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, HayNet, knows the user tasks. You need hay, or do you have hay? That's so awesome. That's it. Sadly, if you go there today, they've added a bunch of stuff. Like, that's right, have pigs, need pigs. They've added a bunch of stuff to make it more complex. I just loved, when I first saw this website, I'm like, they get their audience so well. There's two groups, right? Imagine if we could do all our design that way. Wouldn't that be awesome if you could just like, that's it. Do you have that? And this is, I have to make a token Microsoft joke. I apologize. But, I mean, it would be, all right, we'll just skip right beyond that. It would be so easy if we could boil down what's in people's heads, what their goals are, what they're trying to do at our website into, do you need to do this or this, right? What else do you need to do? Unfortunately, it's much more difficult than that for most of us. For most of us, people come to our websites with a variety of needs and desires, trying to accomplish things. We try to abstract that, make it less kind of squishy, right? Less like, they're trying to do a bunch of stuff, they're trying to like solve each one of these things. But rather try to create something that we call a mental model. And that is how an audience thinks about and approaches tasks and goals, the things they want to get done. This is kind of a shift away from traditional marketing, or at least MarCom, right? The marketing communications where there's messages that we communicate at people. But rather, what do these people want to try to get done? What do they have on their agenda? And, interestingly, what do they have on their agenda separate from the web? What are they trying to get done regardless of what we can do on the screen, right? You